I bought a house a few months ago and moved in last month. The previous owner was a friendly old man that could no longer live alone, so he decided to sell and move in with his daughter. Just to be clear now, apparently he had been allowing use of his driveway to his disabled neighbor lady, largely because street parking is extremely limited, and what little street parking there is pretty much instantly occupied. What I am saying is, unless you have a driveway, you end up having to park a good 5-minute walk away, and that's the best case scenario. I put disabled in quotation marks because the lady in question is just really overweight, and I am not sure if that counts as disabled. Obviously I was unaware of this, so I was surprised to see a large SUV parked in my driveway when I moved in. I ended up having to knock on several doors asking whose car it was because the movers could not stand still on the busy road too long. I figured out it was the neighbor's car, so after a good 10 minutes of knocking, an extremely angry enormous lady opened the door. I told her to move the car, and she immediately started arguing that the neighbor said it was fine. I told her he moved out. I moved in, and no, it is not fine, and to move it because the movers need to unload my stuff. She begrudgingly did. I ended up seeing her walking back half an hour later, completely wet with sweat. Now a few days later I went back to work, and lo and behold, the SUV is parked in my driveway again. I go over there again, spend 20 minutes knocking on the door before this lady opens the door, again, visibly angry. I tell her to move her car. My driveway is not public parking. She protests, saying her ankles can't take walking the distance, and claims I can easily walk. I tell her that while that might be true, it's my goddamn driveway and I want to park there myself. Again she moves her car. Again I spot her half an hour later drenched in sweat making her way home. Well, it happened again a week ago, and this time she would not open her door. I got tired of it and had her SUV towed. She of course came to my house to scream at me. I told her to get the hell off my property. A few days later I had a small fence installed with a lock on it to make sure it did not happen again. I have since been getting dirty looks from her and one other neighbor, and when I told my mom, she told me I should be nicer to people. I do feel sort of bad too. She clearly struggles with the walk after all. My boyfriend of almost 3 years told me a series of white lies that to me seem more serious. Can't tell if I'm overreacting or if this is actually indicative of a bigger problem. My boyfriend and I have been dating for almost 3 years, living together for 2. We have a pretty good relationship, obviously with ups and downs, but we make it work and are happy. A little background on me and my boyfriend. I come from a single-parent home. My father was absent. My mother was and is by no means perfect, but she did her best with what she had. We were poor. Life was never easy for us, but we had each other. Since I was pretty young, I've wanted to pay her back someday. I've worked incredibly hard to be able to do so. I help her financially as much as I can and regularly pay her bills back / send her cash. I'm also her only living child now, as my brother passed away 5 years ago, which basically left me to help her. I don't care. I love my mother, and the right thing to do is to help her when she needs it. But is stressful. This is relevant because my boyfriend described coming from a somewhat similar past, and it is something we have bonded over. Having the mutual experiences seemed to bring us closer. He told me he also helped his parents financially, and we would often vent to each other about the stress it brings. I am not one to confide in many people, so having someone who I felt like actually understood me was meaningful to me. So here is where the lies come in, and I need someone to either tell me I'm not crazy and this is horror, or that I am crazy and this isn't a huge deal. I'm fine with either. When we met, my boyfriend lived in a condo in a pretty swanky part of the city. I live in the US Northeast. He told me he owned that apartment / condo. I found this to be interesting / odd because he was 28 at the time, and I know this property is upwards of $650,000 on the low end, and he was in an entry-level job for only like 2 years, so the numbers just didn't really add up. Whatever, maybe he's good at saving. But then, since living together, I never once saw a piece of mail for a mortgage payment, electric bill, taxes, nothing. Not for 2 whole years. Very odd. Also, when we started living together, he didn't have his room rented out in the former apartment yet, so he was still responsible for that portion of the rent. He would send a Venmo payment to his mother on the 1st of every month for his portion. I don't own property. But I can't think of a scenario where I would Venmo my mother to pay the mortgage on a property I supposedly own. Getting more odd. He would then go to his parents' house for an afternoon and come back really upset. Usually when I would ask why, it was because they were having financial problems and he needed to help them out. I totally understood this and supported him. He literally has cried on my shoulder about this many times. He tried to start a company years back and ended up getting into debt somehow. He told me this debt was $17,000 and that he paid it off. I'm confused because I met him only 2 to 3 years after the supposed debt accrued / company dissolved, and it was already paid off. He told me when he moved back home after the business failed, he was $17,000 in debt and living at his parents' house working at a minimum wage job. How someone with a minimum wage job pays off that much debt in 3 years, I'll never know. We got into a fight a few weeks ago and I finally had enough and confronted him about these things. He doesn't help his parents, they actually pay his phone bill, and this was all a lie. He doesn't own that apartment, he didn't pay off that debt from his company. He initially told me his parents helped pay it off and then like 3 minutes later, came clean. And said that his business partner paid it off, so I have literally no idea what the truth is there, and if anything, in my eyes, his parents are the ones who are financially supporting him. So now, I'm dating a 31 years old man who doesn't pay his own phone bill, was lying to me and / or completely fabricating aspects of his life for 3 years. And then when confronted about it, continued to make up lies and then came clean about them 5 minutes later. I'm obviously concerned that he could lie for this long, about fundamentally important things like our values, and so on. I sincerely thought I would marry this man. He seemed to understand me like no one else and to be a truly caring and genuine person. Now I'm having a hard time rationalizing actually planning a life around someone who would not only lie about their background and family etc. but also financial aspects. Aside from that, I now can't tell what is the truth and what is a lie. I've also noticed other things he has lied about, called him out on it, and he has denied it outright to my face. I see this as a form of gaslighting, as I know I'm not wrong, but he is trying to convince me otherwise. Am I overreacting? Is this a white lie that went haywire? Or is this actually a series of complete and utter bullshit used to manipulate me? And also, is it insane for me to actually consider a life with this man? I am a 19 years old female. I have an estranged grandpa more or less. He's my dad's father, but my dad hardly had a relationship with him. I have 2 other siblings, one younger and one older. My grandma divorced my grandpa when my dad was only 10. So he lived with my grandma his whole life in a different state and didn't see him. When he got older he saw him a little more and my grandpa started coming around a little bit more as well. He'd stay for a week at a time and then go home. He was an old, bitter man to be honest. He never got remarried and lived his whole life in his coastal town with the same friends he'd had his whole life. He wasn't pleasant to be around and could hold grudges longer than anyone I've ever met. But regardless of this, he was filthy rich. He owned a successful business that he sold for $1 million. He retired after selling, but his house sits on an island as well as the biggest piece of land on the island. So it sold for well over $3 million. I was never close with my grandpa, but I took after his sister who is in right now and he adores her. He always told me that he was proud to see me follow in her footsteps. He died a few months ago. Since then, my family has been torn apart. He left everything to me. He essentially liquidated all of his assets and it ended up being close to $8 million. I was shocked. I didn't and still don't know what to do with the money, but I'm going to save it. My dad and stepmom as well as my siblings are hounding me to split the money with them. I just can't do it. My dad is an alcoholic who never said anything nice about his dad. Despite him being bitter, my grandpa actually bought my dad a $300,000 house. My dad would 100% drink away any money given to him. As far as my siblings, my brother has full financial support from my grandma as he is the favorite and he's very wasteful and ungrateful. He never talks to me and always is very mean to me when he does. My little sister is the only person I've actually considered. She's very young and that's really the only thing stopping me. Her mom is money-oriented and would take the money from her. So I'm waiting until she turns 18 and I offered to pay for her college. But now my family is telling me I'm unfair and the money doesn't belong to me and I'm not deserving of it. That I'm too young and I'll waste it on cars and clothes. I don't agree, and now they're all threatening to cut me off and never speak to me. Or even sue me if I don't give them all a chunk of the money. I don't know what to do and I'm buckling under pressure here. I've already had 2 police officers out to my house because my dad is claiming I stole the money from him. Everything was through an attorney. I know I did nothing wrong legally, but morally? I don't have kids and I have no experience with babies or motherhood or children. I'm 18 and beyond being around them in group settings where at least one of the parents and a ton of other people are around. That's it. My brother's wife had a baby 17 days ago. I didn't go visit them yet, but my brother and sister-in-law sent me some pictures. My brother said our cousin Rachel was around a lot because my sister-in-law is having trouble breastfeeding and Rachel is a big believer in it and is helping her. I offered to help them if I needed it, and on Saturday they asked me to go to grocery store for them because no home delivery had an open spot. When I dropped the food off, I was shocked at how bad my sister-in-law looked. She literally looked like the Walking Dead. Barely awake and not showered, and she was actually crying because she was so frustrated. It actually scared me how bad she looked. At first I didn't want to butt in, but it bothered me so much I went back to the store and got a can of baby formula. I figured it would give her a break and my niece could eat. It was even worse when I gave it to my sister-in-law because I said it was no big deal if my niece got formula. It wasn't a problem. My sister-in-law broke down and I was honestly scared because she was weeping. Like in the movies when someone dies, kind of weeping. No one told her it was okay not to breastfeed. She felt so guilty because of Rachel butting in and no one telling her formula was okay. I actually ripped my brother a new one because he sat back while my sister-in-law suffered. There was no way he didn't see how bad she looked. No offense, but she looked terrible. I got my sister-in-law to shower after my niece ate and fell asleep, and I changed the sheets on the bed and told my sister-in-law to sleep while my niece slept, and I said I would get more baby formula. I thought I did the right thing because my sister-in-law actually stopped crying, showered and slept, and the next 3 days she looked better and didn't cry again. My niece gets full. My idiot brother smartened up and told Rachel to stay away and everyone else, especially our parents and SIL's parents, to butt out. They take turns feeding so they both can sleep. My parents and Rachel are furious at me. SIL's sister was in agreement with Rachel and left me an angry voicemail full of swearing. Rachel basically had sister-in-law holding the baby while topless 24/7, and my dumbass brother sat there and didn't help with the baby at all. Rachel breastfed all her kids until they could walk and talk and never had problems, but my sister-in-law obviously did. My dad said I overstepped and should not have butted in. I was scared shitless after seeing sister-in-law on Saturday. Since I'm not a mother or baby expert, I have no idea what it is like with a newborn. I'm second guessing now after feeling like I did the right thing because everyone is angry with me.